You're tuned into the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Zeno Pucks. Here are your hosts, Andy and Brian Matusi.
All right, welcome back. Well, we made it, two things, I guess, but we should probably start with the obvious, is that Andrew is not at home. Where are you?
I am in Vero Beach, Florida, where my wife and I lived before we moved to Cleveland last year. So we're just down here visiting for about a week or so, and then headed back up to the land this coming weekend.
Nice. So you look like you're in Florida with that shirt. I mean, probably anybody that sees the thumbnail for this video will think you're in Tahiti or something. So
if you could see my view out the window right now, it's pretty incredible. So
the view out my window is my neighbor's place. So very exciting. But yeah, so we obviously were a bit late doing the show. We were gonna do the show yesterday, and then of course the Oilers forced a Game 7, but they did make it worth our while because then they did win that Game 7. So now we're all set for the conference finals, Andrew. We got a matchup of the Dallas Stars hosting the Edmonton Oilers and the New York Rangers hosting the Florida Panthers. Let's start in the West, as I think this one, I'm pretty sure we're both pretty well in the same boat on. Look, Edmonton had a great season. Vancouver had a great season. I mean, either one of them in this series, I think, could do well. I don't think either of them has what it takes to beat Dallas after Dallas dispatched Colorado.
Yeah, this is gonna be a tough one, and it's mostly just because I want Edmonton to go to the final, but I in no scenario do I see them stopping Dallas. I think Dallas is the team coming out of the West, no question. They're just Ottinger's been on point for them, and if he stays like that, I mean, it's tough. It's tough shit for whoever ends up facing them in the final, I think.
Yeah, they looked really great. There was a couple moments in the series versus Colorado that I thought maybe the hinges were starting to come off, but they held it together. And Dutchyshen hitting that double OT winner in Colorado was kind of some storybook stuff. Now, Avalanche fans made the point of saying, okay, yeah, but is it really sweet revenge after we won the cup without him? Which is a very good point. I will say that. It's like, I mean, they did win without him, but for Dutchyshen himself, it's got to feel amazing to finally get one back on the Avalanche. But for him, the only way that this storybook has a happy ending is if Dallas wins the cup, which I think is very possible, given that I think after this round, they'll be the team representing the West in the final as well. I'm going to say Dallas in 6.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I guess I don't disagree with you. Like I said, I'd love to see Edmonton go all the way. Obviously, I'm still pulling for Florida, and I'm still standing by my prediction. But I'd love to see Edmonton go all the way too, especially for McDavid and Draisaitl. But I don't think they're stopping Dallas. Dallas is definitely the better team. Ottinger is the better goalie.
Oh my God! If there's one thing where it's not even close, it's goaltending. You could make arguments about forward and defense and all this, and even Dallas's defense is probably considerably better, but up front you can make an argument that they're evenly matched, or that the Oilers are probably even a little bit better up front. But yeah, the goaltending is what separates the men from the boys in this series, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, so with that being said, I too am going to say Dallas in 6.
All right, we'll move over to the East. And we'll touch on this one. This is another one where the team that I think will win is not the team I'm rooting for. Florida does an excellent job taking care of the Bruins. They win in 6 games. There were some troubling moments late in the series. In Game 5, the loss there, and then boy, did it come down to the wire in Game 6. But in the playoffs, even when you're faced in tough scenarios, good teams find a way to get it done, and that's what the Panthers did. They showed why they're one of the favorites in the conference, and now they have a chance to take the conference and go back to the final for the second year in a row.
Right, and there's, even if the Panthers don't make it back to the final, which I'm actually confident they will, I'm sure you and I are going to disagree on that here in a minute, but even if they don't go back to the final, there's nothing to be ashamed about going to the Eastern Conference final back-to-back years. There's nothing to be ashamed of there. I can say at that point, you've made a deep playoff run.
Yeah.
That's something to be proud of either way. So, like you said, Panthers did a good job taking care of Boston, but now they're going up against the New York Rangers team that won the President's Trophy. They're extremely stacked down the middle. Shesterkin's been playing well for them. If there's going to be a team that stops Florida, it's the New York Rangers. No question. That's in my book, that's the only team that can do it.
So, and that's a very good point. And I mean, literally in this case, because they're the last two teams, it's the only team that really can do it in the conference. But you move over and look at the Rangers and Carolina series, and we'll talk about the teams that got eliminated shortly. I know we briefly touched on them and really didn't talk much about Vancouver yet, but for Carolina, and again, another season where it blows up in their face because of the goaltending. It's kind of the same thing over and over again with the Canes, and like I said, we'll get to it. But for the Rangers, again, some scary moments in the series. You're up 3-0, and again, it would now. A lot of people were quick to say, it was the games were much closer than the series would lead you to believe. I mean, there was, the what was there, 2 different overtime games, and there was there was 3 very close games to start the series. It very easily could have been 3-0 Carolina. The reality is it wasn't, though. And like I said before, with Dallas with the Panthers is good teams find a way to get it done. That's what the Rangers did here. Look, it wasn't pretty in the 2 games they lost. It wasn't even pretty in game 6 until the third period. And Chris Kreider has the natural hat trick, and, Mr. Ranger himself comes and, single-handedly pulls them out of the trenches in game 6, and they win and they move on to the conference final. But again, good teams find a way to do that. And Carolina has just not been able to do that the last few years. So looking at the Rangers now, they're going to go into a conference final matchup against the Panthers. These are on paper are probably the 2 best teams in the conference anyways. When I did my bracket at the start of the playoffs, ironically, I picked Tampa Bay, but I thought Tampa was catching fire at the right time, and Florida hadn't been themselves going into the playoffs, but they found a way to turn it back on, as good teams do. So you look at a conference final matchup with these 2 now, and it's very easy to make a case for either team. For myself, because of how well the Rangers have played the entire playoffs, with the exception of 2 games, and the fact that I picked them in my bracket to win it all, I'm going to take the Rangers in 7 games.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think you brought up some good points. I would also like to point out that I think this series right here, Panthers Rangers, is going to be the best series of the playoffs. I think it's going to be better than whatever the matchup is for the Stanley Cup final. I think this is going to be the best series, and it's going to be a brutal series. It's going to be very physical. It's going to be extremely fast, and it's ultimately going to come down to which goalie stands on their head the hardest.
Yeah, this is like when if you were to build like your perfect playoff bracket, this is probably the conference final you want. I mean, you got 2 teams in the East that are disgustingly physical, and you got 2 teams in the West that are loaded and can shoot the lights out.
Well, and I mean, my Eastern Conference bracket has been on point. And I mean, I've been saying this since right before the playoffs started that the Eastern Conference final was going to be Panthers Rangers.
Bracket is perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So the West got a little messed up. I don't know if I pointed this out, but I did go back and look, and I did have Winnipeg beating Colorado in the first round. But that was the only series I was wrong on. So
okay, so you had Dallas winning in the second round regardless.
Yes. So everything else is still on point. It was just that, like we're not going to get back into that, but Winnipeg let everybody down. But back to the Panthers Rangers, I'm going to be a little biased on this one because I said back in March, Panthers are winning it all. Obviously, I'm a Florida Panthers fan. I got to admit, I wasn't even upset that they knocked Boston out. Even though I'm a diehard Bruins fan. But I'm going to use my bias here a little bit. I'm going to say Florida Panthers, 7 games.
Well, and I know you like the Bruins, and I don't want anybody listening to this to think that you don't love the Bruins, but you sent me a text like a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's not that I don't want the Bruins to win. It's that I don't want that conference final spot to be wasted, because I think you and probably most reasonable hockey fans, maybe not diehard Bruins fans, because you never want to admit when you're the underdog, right? But I think the Panthers matchup against the Rangers and potentially now the Stars or the Oilers, significantly better than the Bruins do. They're a very good team. They're very fun to watch when they're clicking, but the Panthers, this is what they're built to do. If we were talking last year's Bruins squad, you would maybe want them to take that series. And I mean,
Which I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this year, I think that was the right way that you put that, is that it's not necessarily that it'd be wasted per se, because anybody has a chance if they're in a series, except the Capitals this year. But the Panthers, obviously the much better chance to win this round and then the next potentially. So
yeah,
I don't think there's any fault. Like, put it this way, last year in the playoffs, my wife likes Vegas. I like the Wild. Well, she likes to watch the Wild too, because Marc-Andre Fleury plays for them. But last year I was like, boy, if it came down to a conference final of Vegas and Minnesota, it would probably be better off cheering for Vegas, because they're the team that could get it done in the final. Like, I mean, Minnesota getting out of the first round is hard enough for them. I can't imagine if they made a conference final. But that's the ultimate thing. When you cheer for two teams and they face each other, you have to be a little bit realistic about it. And I think you were, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I know you may catch some heat for people for, cheering against your favorite team, but it's not even that you're cheering against them. You want one of your teams to win, and you know which one has the better chance.
Absolutely. And I wasn't knocking the Bruins by any stretch. I love my Bruins, and I love the Panthers too. And this is where it's hard rooting for two teams in the same conference, the same division for that matter, but especially in the same conference. And, you can attest to this. My goal in life was never to become a Florida Panthers fan. It just kind of happened because my wife and I lived in Florida and we started going to Panthers games. And at the time they were terrible. So, I mean, nobody saw this coming this season and last season. I never would have expected it. And I found myself this series, going into it, I told you, I'm going to be rooting for the Bruins in this. I found myself unintentionally cheering for the Panthers this series. And it was just like, you know what? No, I do want the Panthers to win it for two reasons. One, like you said, what I texted you, not that it would be a wasted conference final spot, but the only reason the Bruins made it as far as they did is because of Jeremy Swayman. Jeremy,
they played the Leafs in the first round.
Well, that doesn't need to be said. That goes without saying. But Jeremy Swayman carried them to where they were. And I still thought they put up a hell of a fight against the Panthers in the second round. So nothing to be ashamed about, especially a Boston team that wasn't even expected to make the playoffs going into the season. So if you're a Bruins fan, there's nothing to be mad about here. It could have ended better for you, yes, but the Boston was not beating New York in the conference final. That's just the unfortunate truth. If there's any team that's going to do it, it's going to be the Panthers. So this is the series that needed to happen, and I hope the Panthers come out on top.
Yeah, and again, I think I think we're really going to have a great conference final. I truthfully, after how kind of, I don't want to say lackluster the first round was, but it wasn't what we normally expected the first round as far as the level of chaos. I think the second round more than made up for it. I thought all four series were really fun. There was a lot of great moments in all four of these series. And now it set us up with two really good conference final matchups. And I'm to the point now where I think any of the four Stanley Cup final matchups we get, any of the possible Stanley Cup final matchups we can get, rather, I'm thinking we're going to be along on a pretty good ride, regardless of who you're cheering for. If you got a team in it, I mean, good God, I'm sorry that your heart's going to be pounding out of your chest for the next couple of weeks, but boy, if you're not a fan of any of these teams, this is great hockey to watch.
Well, that's exactly it too. I mean, even if the Rangers beat the Panthers, then I'm still going to be excited as hell to watch the Stanley Cup final. It's good. These playoffs have been insane. This whole hockey season's been insane. We've said that multiple times. It's just a great year for hockey. I'm starting to see more hockey fans coming out of the woodworks, whether they're just bandwagon riders or whatever. But I'm seeing more people talk about hockey online this year, even people I know, more than I ever have before. So it's just a great year for it. And I think it shows good things for the future going forward as to how much this sport is growing, which is exactly what we want to see.
Yeah, no, I think you hit that right on the head. The game is growing, and hopefully it's an exponential growth. I do feel like this game is significantly farther ahead of where it was when I started watching 10, 11 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I would like to think the sport itself is in a much better place as far as the quality of the product. So we'll see what happens, but I'm looking forward to the next 2 weeks or so. I'm not looking forward to how late this season's going to run. I mean, the season's going to end in like 3 days later. We're going to be looking at draft and awards and all that shit, but that's a different conversation for a later time.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's overlapping with the Calder Cup playoffs right now, which my wife and I are heavily invested in because the Monsters are still in it. And that's going to run even later than the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, which is weird how that always works out. My wife and I and some of our friends last night went to the Milwaukee Admirals game. That was really fun. So they're rolling along now, and that's another league too, the AHL. We're depending on how it shakes out, we're looking at a potentially really loaded conference final there. If the Admirals and the Monsters move on, we're realistically looking at a conference final where it's the top 2 seeds in the West versus the 1 and the 3 seed in the East. I mean, we're looking at some really loaded rosters. So we may address that at some point. We don't follow the AHL as closely, but I mean, as far as the league goes, but definitely something worth talking about when we get to that point.
Yes, sir.
Now I do want to take a deeper dive into the teams that missed because, well, I think all 4 of these teams that got knocked out, not missed the playoffs, but got knocked out this round. All 4 teams that got knocked out, there's some questions that lie ahead, and I think in some cases more than others. So I want to start with, we can start with the Bruins. They go into last offseason, heartbreaking ending of the season. They lose 2 of some of the best players in franchise history to retirement. They come into this season like dirt low expectations. They come out, they have an incredibly hot start. They literally hold the division lead basically until the end of the season. And then on the last day of the season, they lose it to the Panthers. But they have, by all accounts, a way better season than probably anybody expected. Swayman and Ullmark were both really good again this year for them. They had great numbers. Swayman kind of overtook the net this year as the number 1 goalie. But now for the Bruins going into the offseason after a loss like that, you saw where the holes were. We talked about needing the center depth. If you're the Bruins, where are you going from here with this team?
First thing I want to point out is I don't want to say it's for sure going to happen, but I will be surprised if Ullmark is still a Boston Bruin come the beginning of next season.
Oh, absolutely.
And if he's not gone this summer, I promise you he's gone at the trade deadline. No, quite maybe even before it. But Ullmark's time in Boston is done. And as a Bruins fan, it's sad to see because we all love the Swayman-Ullmark tandem. That aside from being teammates, they're legitimately best friends. I mean, they really have a brotherhood between the 2 of them. And I think that's greatly contributed to their sex. Jesus.
Yeah. I knew they liked each other, but not like that.
Oh, man. Whew. Not what I wanted to say. Their success on Jesus Christ, dude. Their success on the ice. I'm sorry, everybody. But I think that's
no wonder Ullmark didn't want to waive his no move clause. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no shit. God. But I think that's played a big factor, not for them, just them individually, but the team as a whole. I mean, that when you have a goaltending tandem like that, that really does wonders for your team. Like I said, I think Swayman was the way to go during the playoffs, and it really showed on his end.
He proved it. Yeah, we'll talk about him in a little bit because he was unreal. I think you're right on though. Look, the Bruins tried to move Ullmark at the deadline. He wouldn't waive his no trade to go to LA. From all accounts, it sounded like the return was going to be Pierre-Luc Dubois. So truthfully, Linus Ullmark saved himself and the Bruins a nightmare on that. But his no trade or no move clause isn't full, so he does have to submit a list of teams that he would not like to go to. So realistically, the Bruins have the option of trading him to any of the teams not on his list. So I do think this offseason he's probably gone. Mm-hmm. And it sucks for the Bruins because, again, and I hate this phrase, but you need good vibes guys on your team. And when both your goalies are playing at an elite level like that, you really don't want to throw a wrench into the pile. But the glaring flaw for this team was that they just didn't have the centers. And I'm not saying that it was going to be easy for them to replace Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. Those are probably 2 of the best centers that have ever played for the Bruins. And so it's hard to, especially Krejci, prime Krejci in the playoffs was a different beast.
Animal,
I mean, he was an unreal player. But I'm not saying you have to replace that level, but you need a number 1 and a number 2 center of some caliber. And I thought Zacha played great. I thought he had good chemistry with Pasternak, and I thought he was a great power play guy. And Coyle has always been a chippy guy, and he's a great guy. But I don't even mind Coyle as a number 2 center, but I think Zacha needs to flank somebody, and you need to have a true number 1 center.
Yeah.
But really, I thought this team was its most effective when Coyle could be your number 3 guy, and you could drop Zacha in on one of the top 2 lines, or even on Coyle's wing too. They need to, they don't want to lose Olmark, but they've seen that Swayman can be the guy. You got to go out and at least get one number 1 bona fide center. I don't know who it is. And as we get into the offseason, we'll maybe have a clear picture of what's available, who's available, and what makes sense for the Bruins and for another team. But yeah, you got to go out and find somebody. And finding a number 1 center isn't just easy. They don't grow on trees. It's not that simple, but you have to make an effort to do it. And I know the Bruins tried to address it at the trade deadline, but if the return really was going to be Pierre-Luc Dubois, that wasn't going to be the solution anyway. So I'm glad they didn't waste a huge asset like that on a guy that's not part of the solution.
No, and that would have.
I think that might have cost Don Sweeney his job if it would have went through.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I don't disagree with you. And back to your point about Bergeron and Krejci too. I mean, yeah, they're 2 of the best centers to ever play for the Bruins. But the other thing you need to factor in is not only for the Bruins, but Patrice Bergeron is one of the best centers to ever play the game of hockey. That's the other thing. So I mean, and you can't go out looking for someone of that caliber because realistically, it's just not going to happen. There's other holes that need to be filled too throughout these playoffs. Charlie McAvoy was all but absent, not physically, but
I say, talk about absent. I don't think Matt Grzelcyk played a game. I think he played 1 game, didn't he?
Yeah, he played 1 game, but McAvoy didn't really do shit to benefit them either on the ice. So I'm interested to see what happens with Montgomery. This offseason.
I think he stays. I think
he will, but
you got to give him. You saw what he did when he had a team that was properly built. I think if you give him a team that has, again, a number 1 center and you're getting great goaltending from Swayman, the other challenge will be finding a second goalie then, unless they think Brandon Bussy's going to make the jump and play as the backup, which is okay. I mean, they've liked what he's done in Providence. That's been a really good program down there. I think they were second in the East in the AHL this year. So very good team, very good goalie. But for the Bruins, they have to find something there. But truthfully, for the coach, you have to, when you have 2 great seasons like this, especially this season with how tempered the expectations were, I think you have to do right by him. You have to go out and get him some good players and see what he can do. Because truthfully, I don't think the Bruins window is done with this group. There's definitely some pieces that need to move. Like we said, Olmark's probably going. Really, with Grzelcyk, since he didn't play, that's a good defense as an NHL defenseman. Even if he's a 6th guy or a 5th guy, or even if he's a depth guy, when he was at his best, like in their 2019 run, he's a really effective defender. So there's a suitor out there for him, and I don't know who it is, but I think the Bruins could actually get some really good returns this year. And you could argue that they very easily, if this is done right, could be the favorite to win this division next year. They almost did it this year with this team. No reason to think that they can't do it next year with a properly built squad. But I definitely think you give Don Sweeney benefit of the doubt. He almost made a really shitty choice, but largely I thought he's made some very good decisions as this team's GM. And I think you got to give Monty another shot. He's come in and all he's done is had 2 unbelievable seasons. So as an outsider looking in, I say that just make some changes, but the right changes could go a long way for this team.
Absolutely. I mean, I could talk about this for hours because there's just so much that does need to be addressed as far as this team goes. I'm also interested to see what happens with Jake DeBrusk this offseason, but that's also been a talking point for the last several seasons. So
it always seems like he's going to move, and then it seems like then he never does. So, we'll see. I would like to say, I think Jake DeBrusk will do well wherever he goes, but he could do well if he stays in Boston too. So now let's talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, and I have a feeling this will be the one we spend the most time on.
Yeah, that was I was kind of disappointed in that series. I mean, I'm not questioning the Rangers, but I really expected a lot more out of them. Freddie Anderson in particular, because he was playing out of his mind going into the playoffs. It's just what the hell happened. I'm kind of sitting here like the Winnipeg, Colorado series, but not to the same extent because Carolina didn't absolutely shit the bed. there were just some big concerns that need to be addressed.
I think it's the same shock level as the Winnipeg series,
yes,
but just for a way different reason. I mean, I think we can probably agree Carolina, you can probably say the same for Winnipeg too, but Carolina had the best trade deadline of any team in the conference. They add Kuznetsov, they add Gensel, two of the big fish. Both players play outstanding down the stretch. Gensel was just unbelievable for them. And there's talks maybe he wants to re-sign there, which I wouldn't blame him. The weather's probably beautiful there all year. The bottom line is that they did not do enough to get the job done. And for Freddie Anderson, for as good as his start to the playoffs was, it didn't seem like he had the same mojo in round 2. And when we went into the playoffs, I mentioned, look, Freddie Anderson's biggest issue is that he plays so many games during the regular season. Normally, he gets into the playoffs and falls apart because he's tired. This year, he misses all but 17 games because of his blood clotting issues that he had, which thankfully for him wasn't an injury per se, but he wasn't playing, wasn't using that energy. So he comes back, he's fresh as a daisy. He has an unbelievable stretch the last month and a half of the season. Starts off the playoffs on fire, doesn't look like anybody can beat him. And again, I know the first 3 games they lost to the Rangers were all nail-bitingly close, but that's not even a word, but you know what I mean? They were all super close games, very easily could have won them, but there was a couple of goals he let in where I'm like, that's the same old Freddie Anderson that we saw when he let in the soft ones when he was at the Leafs and even a couple times in Anaheim. Now, I know the 2015 run he had in Anaheim was an unreal team, but there was a couple stinkers he even had with Anaheim too. And so I think for the Hurricanes, it's like there's not a lot that they want to change, but the sad reality is they have a ton of free agents. You know, it sounds like they're going to let Pesce walk in free agency. They got to get a deal done for Slavin, I believe still. I think Shea's a UFA. They have, I think 6 or 7 like star players that are going to be free agents that they have to sign. And they got Seth Jarvis as an RFA. That's a deal you got to get done for them. You know, he's not the best player of those players, but he's the kind of guy you want to be on your roster in the playoffs. He's got that grit level. He's a hard physical player. He's the kind of guy that helps you make a deep run. I'm not saying he's the guy that puts you over the top, but you need guys like Seth Jarvis to get it done in the playoffs. But the goaltending, look, eventually you have to let the ship sail. How many years the past half decade have they run it with Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta? And it's just been a revolving door with those. Not even a revolving door. It's just been back and forth with these two, and it's never been enough to get it done. And listen, I don't know. I believe who's the GM there. I think it's Tom Dundon.
it is. Yep.
If you're Tom Dundon, you gotta find a way to get the job done here. I mean, it's not acceptable to have a team that's this good and still not even advance, not even win a conference final game. They've made it twice to the conference final with this group and haven't won a conference final game. You have to look in the mirror and see what's wrong with yourself if you're gonna make any significant changes. And I think with all the pending free agents they have going into this offseason, I think they're going to have the opportunity to maybe do some self-reflecting and make those big changes. But I think regardless of what they do, the biggest change has to be in net, because if Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta are not the guys.
Yeah, which is a shame because,
Don Waddell's the GM of the Hurricanes. I think Dundon's the president.
Oh, well, I'll be over here. It's a shame because I personally like Freddie Anderson a lot as a goaltender, and I thought, maybe this might have been the year for him to at least go really deep and, prove to all the naysayers that he's not the problem. Because I personally never thought he was. I thought he was always just what's the word I'm looking for? He's a result of the team in front of him.
Real quick, Tom Dundon's the owner of the Hurricanes. That's where I got mixed up.
Isn't that what you said the first time?
No, I said he was the GM.
Oh, well, then I didn't even hear you correctly.
Yeah, so. No, Tom Dundon's the owner. I would say I know he's. I was thinking. I was like, well, maybe he's the president. I'm like, no, he's a fucking owner.
Okay, so I was sitting here and I'm like, so you were right. Okay, never mind. I'm over here. I'll be over here.
Don Waddell's their GM. But yeah, so yeah, don't mind me. Anyways, keep going.
So yeah, the one other thing I want to point out is I saw in the comments, and I thought this was kind of comical, that everybody was just shitting on Rod Brindamore, and saying, "Oh, he's gone this offseason. That's it. He sucks." And then less than 48 hours later, they extend him. So I
Yeah, I
thought
was
that
going to
was
say that
great.
for later, but yeah, Brendan Moore signing a 5-year extension with the Hurricanes to remain their coach. Look, if they got swept out, I could see the argument, but we know how stacked the odds are when you're down 3-0 in a series. For them to win 2 and almost win the third to force a game 7, I think says a lot about the group, but it does say a lot about a coach to be able to rally your guys and get to that point.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's complaining about Rod Brindamore honestly should just shut up, because he's an excellent coach, and every team in this league would kill to have him as a coach.
Yeah,
So
there's a saying that goes, listen, you show me a team with a good goalie, I'll show you a team with a good coach.
yeah,
Brendan Moore's a great coach that doesn't have a good goalie. If you put any of these elite goalies in the league, like let's say Linus Ullmark goes to Carolina, you're telling me that team can't get over the hump with Linus Ullmark in their goal,
oh
or
man,
just any put. It doesn't even matter if it makes sense or not. Put any elite goalie on that team. Put Ottinger or Shesterkin or Bobrovsky or Swayman or any of these teams with an elite goalie on Carolina, and they probably can get over the hump. The reality is
absolutely.
that they don't. We put Vasilevsky there, that would be sick. But
Oh god, dude, that'd be terrifying.
yeah, but yeah. So the reality is they need a goalie. There's some changes that have to be made, probably for the better too. It doesn't sound like Marty Necas is going to stay, unless I heard wrong on that. But there's going to be some changes there, but it may be for the better. You may need to bring in guys with a fresh set of eyes that haven't had all these crushing playoff defeats with this group. So bring in some fresh eyes and bring in some fresh ice even.
Yeah, there you go. Nicely
But
played.
bring in some fresh sets of eyes into this and get a freaking goalie. And I don't think there's any reason the Hurricanes can't stay in the mix here, especially under the same coach. You know, if they switch coaches, that's another thing. Now you're learning a whole new system. Maybe the system doesn't gel with these players. So rather than derailing your own train, you stick with what you got, you retool, and you try again. And that's the reality of the situation. I mean, look, 5 years is a long time to have a really solid team that doesn't even make it to the finals. Like you look at Tampa Bay even, but look at the gap they had. They had the run to the Stanley Cup final in 2015, and then they don't make it back for 5-6 more years. And then eventually they make it back. They win 2 and make it to a third one after that. So sometimes winning doesn't happen overnight, but the Hurricanes, I think, would be crazy to try blowing it up. I don't think anybody suggested that they should, but if I'm a Hurricanes fan, I'm still pretty optimistic, given the outlook of this team. It's already a very good team. They just got to fix the damn goaltending.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be something that we're just gonna have to follow as it happens. I don't want to sit here and speculate. They know what they need to fix. We all know it. I'm a little disappointed. I still didn't think that they were going to beat New York, regardless.
I don't think so either. Just the way that they went down, though, was rough.
That's the issue I have with it. And 3 unanswered goals is crazy. So in that short of a time. So, but I mean, it happens, and that's why we say you never know. Anything can happen to anybody, and I mean, this series could have still just as easily been Carolina's, but there's some holes in the team that they have to adjust. And I think it's going to start with goaltending, like you mentioned, and we'll see what happens. I think Kuznetsov is going to be a good fit there for a while. I'm interested to see where Gensel goes. That's what I'm focusing on right now. I want to know.
That's another reason I wouldn't be surprised if Gensel extends there. If they're not spending the money to keep Shea and they're not spending the money to keep Pesci and Necas, I think Necas is going to ask for too much, which is why I don't think he stays. But listen, if you let those guys go, first of all, you have the money then to sign Jake Gensel. All right, and we're back after some technical difficulties. You know, I get my internet fixed and then it still doesn't work. Imagine that. Okay, so we were talking about Gensel signing. Listen, Jake Gensel, we talk about guys that can push you over the hump in the playoffs. That's the kind of guy you need to push you over the hump. So for Carolina, like I said, to let those guys go, if you can get Gensel re-signed, it's all worth it, because you look at the group the Penguins had before they had Jake Gensel. That was a pretty good team. They slot in Jake Gensel and Brian Rust and Connor Sherry and all them come up. That team gets over the hump in the playoffs. They won 2 championships in a row. Jake Gensel is an amazing player. And I think if you let Shea and Pesci And again, I know those guys are defensemen, but if you let a guy like Nate just go, if you're replacing him with Jake Gensel, you don't even think twice about it because Jake Gensel is an excellent hockey player with a proven playoff track record.
I agree with you. That the biggest thing, though, that it's going to come down to is that Jake Gensel has to want to stay. If he wants to go somewhere else, none of that matters. So, and we don't, I mean, at this point, I haven't heard him say one way or another what's going on in his mind. So we'll see what happens when and if that comes out. But I don't see why he wouldn't want to stay there. I think that's a team that has a lot of potential moving forward, and I think he's a great fit there. I think the additions of him and Kuznetsov were just really what that team needed to bolster that offense. So we'll see moving forward. But I think Gensel's a good fit no matter where he ends up. He's just an all-around great hockey player.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the reality of the situation for Carolina is, like I said, they have the right pieces. You just need to do some. You got to stop being stubborn, getting in your own way, and trying to run back with the same group. Because look what that did for the Leafs, and wait for. But again, it's the definition of insanity. Trying the same thing over and over, expect a different result.
Brian, your audio was a little wonky right there. I could hear you. It just sounded a little robotic. But I think instead of just trying to restart that clip, what Brian was saying is, you have to address certain things. And what he said was the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So, and that's a very perfect way of putting that. I think moving forward, no, I don't want to speculate. We'll just see what they do during the offseason. We'll see how this offseason goes. I don't want to put a whole bunch of shit out there and then be wrong and then have to go back and say, oh, yeah, I was an idiot. So
fair enough. All right, let's go talk about the Avalanche. Listen, this will be real quick and easy. The Avs are a sick team. They ran into an even better team in Dallas. They didn't answer their goaltending issues. I know Georgiev had a really good first round and a decent-ish second round with some low spots, but losing to Dutchyshen because of his off-ice issues again was a big blow to the team. And so I know, and losing Taves for that game in the same game didn't help. So you look at Colorado, that's a team that can probably run it back if they address goaltending.
Yeah, then which you and I have been talking about that since we started doing this show. And with the fact that they didn't address goaltending at the trade deadline, not only did they not address it, they didn't even make an attempt to. Like, it was the furthest thing from their mind at the trade deadline. And we both said that will ultimately be their downfall in the long run, is the goaltending. Like you said, Georgiev had an exceptional first round and an okay second round with some low spots, but ultimately towards the end, his colors started to show through. And it's something that Colorado needs to make a change for. I mean, they got lucky in 2022 that, a lot like this year, they were able to outscore any goaltending issues they had. Darcy Kemper wasn't a great goalie for them, but they were such
Kemper had a couple really good games though too. I mean, he had a lot of bad ones, but he wasn't unusable either.
No, he wasn't. But Colorado was just such an absolute juggernaut this year. You could have put somebody's grandma in net, and they probably still would have won the cup that year. But back to my point, there was something they should have done. Even if they weren't going to replace Georgiev, they should have had another really good option as a backup to go to. And unfortunately, in this situation, Georgiev was their best goaltender, and it just wasn't enough for them. I did expect more out of them in this series, and in the sense of them beating Dallas. So, I mean, I more or less wanted them to beat Dallas, but it's a tough look. We'll see what they do during the summer. You've got to address those goaltending issues, man. I mean, other than that, the team's still a great team. The Nichushkin stuff, we're not going to talk about. It's his own personal issue. We don't get into that on that show. If that's what you're here for, you're in the wrong place. There's other podcasts that'll dive into that, I'm sure, if you want to, but that's just not what Brian and I are about. He's got his own struggles, and us harping on him or anything isn't going to help anything. So we'll just leave that issue alone. It is a blow to the Avalanche. That sucks. It's a team that still doesn't have Landeskog either.
He's going to retire. There's zero chance he comes back.
I was going to say, I would bet a year's salary that his time in the NHL is done. So that's another huge blow to the Avalanche. They're going to have to make some serious adjustments and see what they can get going for next year. And I mean, as much as you hate to see it, even if that means missing the playoffs so you can figure out how to get shit structured, sometimes that's just what it takes.
Well, I think that's a bit of a reach. There's two things. First of all, the Avalanche are too good to miss the playoffs. The second thing, half of the Central Division is fucking awful. I mean,
well, yeah, but
I just can't see a scenario where they miss. Dallas is probably the only team that's truly better than them. Winnipeg's very good. St. Louis is meh. The Wild are meh. The Blackhawks are awful. Nashville's pretty good. But I mean, I think missing the playoffs for them, if they miss the playoffs next season, I think that's when they go into panic mode because that group is too good to miss the playoffs. Success in the playoffs is a little different based on how they're structured with the goaltending, but I think missing the playoffs is a nightmare scenario for the team.
Well, I'm not saying that's for sure going to happen. I'm just saying if it does happen, so be it. I mean, yeah, you could say it's a stretch. What the hell is that? Sorry, Florida wildlife. I just think I'm trying to figure out how I can word this. There's things that to your point about the Central being dog shit. Yeah, but they're not only playing the Central for the whole season. That's the thing.
Aren't, but they play the rest of the league, but so does the rest of their division, and half of their division isn't that good. That's true. The thing. They have no excuse to miss the playoffs. They're just too good. They're way too good. I would think if they miss the playoffs, there's wholesale changes. You can't miss the playoffs with a team that's that good.
No, but anything's possible. And I, like you said, if they do, okay, now what the hell's going on? Now you got a fire sale on the edge. Exactly. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. I was just so disappointed in Colorado.
We talked about it after the deadline. Everybody knew what they had to do and they didn't do it. So, and it sounded like the only guy they tried to go after was Jake Allen. And that tells me how serious they were about trying to address their goaltending issues. And that's nothing against Jake Allen, but truthfully, with a team that's already won a cup, the only thing you're missing now is a goalie, and that's the best you could go after. Get fucking real.
Well, and I was surprised that they didn't try to go after guys like Ullmark or you say Saros, guys like that.
The problem there is that
the cap space. I know.
Well, the cap space. The other thing is that what has to go the other way. If Nashville were to give up Saros or the Bruins were to give up Ullmark, they wanted a good center coming the other way. Colorado's not wanting to trade one of their good centers. They just got Mittelstadt. Obviously, they're not moving McKinnon ever. No, and so that limits their options. So I understand the deck was partially stacked against them, but again, to only go after a guy like Jake Allen told me how serious they were about addressing it, which was obviously not at all. I do want to move on now and talk about the Canucks. This is a team where I don't think we have to spend too much time on either. Listen, they had a really amazing season, especially given how things went last year. It seemed like this was going to be a bit of a process. Rick Tocchet comes in his first year and completely turns it around. In his first full year, completely turns it around. They make the playoffs. They win the division. Just a really good year for them. They have two crushing blows. They lose Demko to injury, and then now, of course, they after having some blood clotting issues, they lose probably their best player in the playoffs, Brock Besser. I don't think the Vancouver Canucks really need to change anything. I don't think anything needs to go out. Maybe they want to bring in a little bit more depth to help them with scoring and maybe hope Pettersson has some better numbers in the playoffs next year. But a healthy roster is truly what they needed. I think they made it almost, they were one win from the conference final with a third string goalie. I think a fully healthy Demko and Besser not having medical issues, I think that's what gets them over. So thankfully, the news for Brock Besser is that his blood clots weren't anything life-threatening, but obviously did enough just to keep him out of the game. So hopefully he gets better and doesn't have those issues because blood clots can be hit or miss with these guys. So hopefully it's nothing long-term. Besser's a really outstanding player. He was almost traded last year. I was really hoping he was coming to come to the Wild because that's where he's from, and there was talks about it, but never anything serious. So kind of bummed he didn't go. And then he had an all-star season this year. I'm like, yeah, he's never leaving there. So
yeah,
for the Canucks, listen, they just got to get healthy and hope to God they can run it back next year. But I don't think they need any big changes. I think they just need maybe a little more depth up front, but I think that's a team that could do some damage next year. Just a shitty way to end the season. I do feel bad for him.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head, man. I mean, I'm still, even with those injuries, I still was very impressed with their play throughout the second round. I still, even with that, even not having Demko, I thought for sure that they were going to make quick work of Edmonton. So I was pleasantly surprised on Edmonton's behalf. For Vancouver, shit way for your season to end. But like you said, this is a damn near perfect team already. It's just as long as everybody can stay healthy, they would have had a much deeper run. So that sucks. I personally think the better matchup would have been Vancouver and Dallas for the conference final. Because I think, like I mentioned, I think Dallas is going to make quick work of Edmonton.
I think Dallas was beating either of them anyways, but yes.
Probably, but I think that Vancouver would have been the better opponent for them. I think Edmonton will be a pretty easy opponent for Dallas with as good as they are. But for Vancouver, I really did like how they looked this series, and it sucks it had to end the way it did. But like you said earlier, if they can stay healthy in next year's playoffs, maybe get a little bit better numbers out of Pettersson, they're still a team to be feared for sure. And kind of sucks to see him go out the way they did. I'm not a Canucks fan, and I don't get along with Canucks fans. But that's a shitty way for any team season to end when you're on a roll like that. So we'll see what happens.
All righty. Let's before we move on, there's only a couple of things we want to touch on, but we definitely need to take some time to mention our sponsors. And I know you want to take some time to mention the Warrior for Life one.
Absolutely. But first, I'm going to start off with talking about our main show sponsor.
Do you have it with you?
I did not bring it with me.
Crap.
I meant to. I just forgot. So, but you've all seen it. You watch the show. You listen to the show. As always, the show is brought to you by Xenopucks. Xenopucks makes a top-tier, high-quality off-ice practice puck designed for use on almost any off-ice surface, whether it's the floors in your house. It can be carpet or tile or hardwood, whatever you want to use it on. Outdoors, you can use it on concrete, asphalt, dirt, or turf. I don't know why you would do that, but you can. I've seen it done. Anyway, it is the same size and weight as a regulation hockey puck, though it is not made out of rubber, and for that reason, we and Xenopucks themselves do not recommend that you use it for a game. It's not something you want to get hit with. I can tell you from experience, it does not feel good. Not that a regular hockey puck does, but it's perfect. It glides like a hot knife through butter on almost any surface. It's real good. You know, you're wanting to work on your stick handling or your shots. Ice time's not always an option, so going out in the garage with it, going out in the driveway is a real good way to get that time in and still get your work done for the day. So head over to xenopucks.com right now. Get yourself one of their pucks. You're not going to find another puck like it. So grab one of those, and while you're on there, check out their merch selection as well, and be sure to follow them on Instagram at Xenopucks.
And tell them we sent you.
Please, although they should know.
Yeah. You're in the birthplace of Xenopucks right now, Florida.
I sure am. At least that's where the two gentlemen whose names I'm still waiting to reveal till I get them on the show. They are both South Florida boys, and they're huge Panthers fans, so they're happy with the way the playoffs are going right now as well. But I am in the birthplace of Xenopucks.
Awesome. If you're gonna get yourself a Xenopuck, you're probably a person that's practicing a lot off the ice. If you're willing to make the purchase and use this thing, listen, sticks ain't cheap either. Those blades can break easily. You don't want to burn them out, scuff them up and everything. You don't want to ruin that sick tape job you got, right? Why don't you go check out our friends over at the Hockey Wraparound? You can pick up all kinds of products from them. You can get their equipment drying racks because Lord knows that hockey equipment gets stinky really fast. Get yourself some tape because, again, you can't have a sick tape job without the tape. And, of course, you got to protect it. So get yourself the blade protector from Hockey Wraparound. It's going to protect your investment without sacrificing your off-ice practice quality. Visit hockeywraparound.com/fresh-ice-pod or /fresh-ice and use the code fresh-ice-pod to get 15% off your order. I always get those two mixed up.
I was saying that was the second week in a row.
I was going to say, I might just have to start putting it on a piece of paper in front of my eyeball so I don't screw it up. But yes, definitely go get that. No hockey products are cheap. We all know that. It's not a secret. So why waste your money and destroy your stick and ruin your awesome tape job when you don't have to?
Absolutely. And more importantly, you're not destroying your $400 hockey stick. So with that being said, I do want to talk about Warrior for Life Fund. And I should point out that I am in no way an ambassador for the Warrior for Life Fund. The only relationship I have to them is that we are friends with Bob Pizzini, who is an ambassador for them. And what they do, they are a military charity in a sense. What they do is they go out and they help veterans, whether it's special operations, regular military, whatever it is. They help military members and their families transition back into civilian life or coming back from a deployment through the power of hockey. They get guys out on the ice, building camaraderie with each other, because I can speak from experience in saying that coming back from a deployment or moving into the civilian world after being in the military is one of the hardest adjustments anybody can make. And you definitely, no matter what, you are going to feel alone or like you're fighting this battle on your own. And, add that in, and on top of it, add PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of that stuff. It really takes a toll on an individual. Well, the Warrior for Life Fund is here to alleviate a lot of that, and they do it by building camaraderie on the ice. And they also have adaptive sports too. They do sled hockey as well. But one thing I have to commend is the Boston Bruins alumni organization, because they get heavily involved with the Warrior for Life Fund too. The Warrior for Life Fund team has played against Boston Bruins alumni teams. So they're out there. There's tools out there to get yourself some help if you're a veteran that's struggling with any kind of transition, whether it be coming back from deployment or just transitioning back into military life. And they're there to help your family as well. So your wife and kids, your husband and kids, whatever you got going on, they're there to help everybody. And it's through the game of hockey. And I can't think of a better way to help somebody transition like that than to do it through a sport that's all about being inclusive and building camaraderie. The Warrior for Life Fund has some really good people working for it, and they're good people doing good things for other good people. So head over to warriorforlifefund.org today and please make a donation.
Good stuff. Now we're going to shift. We're going to go from something nice to something not nice. We're going to do the tough look of the week, presented by Lighting's Property Management out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. For all your landscape, lawn care, and snow removal needs, give Lighting's a call. They do it all. The tough look of the week has been the tough look of the playoffs, been the tough look of the regular season. That would be the NHL officiating. And boy, was it center stage in round 2. All 4 series, all 8 teams, fan bases complaining about the piss poor job of the NHL referees. I know it's a hard job. I know this is the fastest sport in the world. These refs have been so bad. It's made some of these games unwatchable. The shit that flies in the playoffs is always there's always quite a bit further than what flies in the regular season. But some of the stuff that happens right in front of an official and doesn't get called, it's just getting fucking exhausting. And I don't ever want to spend too much time on it because we could do it every show. But we're certainly not going to let them get off scot-free because it's fucking exhausting.
No, somebody needs to fucking hold these guys accountable. We've said it before. When are they going to start making the refs answer to the media after every game? Hold them accountable for their decisions that they're making. Ask them why they're missing these calls or why they're making terrible calls to costing other teams the game. And I'm not saying every time a team loses, it's the officiating's fault. But to an extent, officiating does have an impact on the game when it goes poorly. Yeah. So it's bad. There's just some god-awful calls being made. And then you're seeing, especially when it's coming to goaltender interference, you're seeing a call go one way and then a different game, it's the exact same play and the call goes the other way. Make up your goddamn mind. That's all I have
Here's
to
the
say.
thing. Even the games where the officiating doesn't affect the final outcome, it's still been bad. Even if it has it could be a 9-1 game. If the officiating sucks, it still sucks. It just
Correct.
means it didn't have an effect on the game. It doesn't mean not having an effect on the outcome of the game doesn't mean that there should be a subpar standard. And that's clearly acceptable because the league has not acted on it. And I know the referees are protected by a union, but it does not matter. Hold them accountable. And maybe we're starting to see some signs of that because I know Wes McCauley has not been center stage a lot. And it's finally, the cat's out of the bag that he's a terrible fucking ref and he just has a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
But they're finally holding him out of these big games. And, maybe that's exactly what we need. Very few referees in the league do I see on the lineup card. And I'm like, oh God, or I'm like, good, he's refereeing the game. The only referee I can truly think of off the top of my head that anytime I see him calling a game, it doesn't seem to be a problem is Kelly Sutherland. I think pretty much anytime I've seen him calling a game, usually it's pretty fair. I think Steve Kazari is a terrible referee. Wes McCauley's a terrible referee. Justin St. Pierre is a terrible referee. Like there's a lot of really bad ones. And it's really bad that, listen, if you're a referee and people know your name, it's usually not a good thing. There are some exceptions, but there's just there needs to be a better standard set. And I'm hoping that maybe down the road here, we'll finally have some accountability for these guys because about 99% of them need it.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's been some good refs that have made some terrible or questionable decisions in these playoffs. And one of those I want to point out, I don't know what your feelings are, but I personally think TJ Luxmore is a really good referee. But even in these playoffs, he's had some questionable decisions that I just didn't care for. So I don't think I think it's 100% it needs to be addressed with everybody, not just the guys who are screwing up. Everybody needs to hear about it. Everybody needs to be held accountable. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, also the linesmen too. Drop the fucking puck. This is a joke, dude. And we're not here to watch you dick around with the puck and toss guys out of the circle. Drop the puck and let's go. If it's not a perfect drop, listen, unless you basically throw it to one team, you don't need to redrop it. Just drop it and leave it at that. And let's stop with this fucking circus. These games would be half an hour shorter if the refs would just drop the fucking puck right away.
Dude.
Or the linesman, sorry. It's so annoying and I'm just fed up with it. And so, I know nobody's perfect and even the best officials will make mistakes and that's okay. But when it's the focal point of every close game, that's a problem.
Exactly. And to your point about dropping the puck, I'm right there with you. That shit, almost every game I'm yelling at the TV, drop the fucking puck. Stop standing there for 15 seconds just holding it. Just pull up to the face-off circle, drop the puck, get the hell out of the way. Let's get this game going. It drives me nuts, and it's every damn face-off, too. That's what drives me nuts.
All right. Well, before we get our blood pressure too high,
too late.
Couple of things I want to address before we go. First one, you mentioned Brendan Moore signing his extension in Carolina. It's a 5-year deal.
Yes.
I think it's a good look for them. Again, we know that the change that has to be made there is probably the players.
Yes. No, it's definitely not a coaching issue there.
You look at another team that got a new coach. Toronto signs on Craig Berube to be their head coach.
Yeah,
that's a good choice for them. Again, that's an organization. Look, they needed a fresh set of eyes behind the bench. I don't even know if Sheldon Keefe was the problem, but they needed a fresh set of eyes. You bring in Craig Berube, who's got a Stanley Cup pedigree. And so you have a coach who knows how to win, that can teach these guys the right way to play. And again, I don't even think Keefe was entirely the problem, but the big change that's going to have to come for Toronto is in net. Obviously, Samsonov's probably out the door. Can they count on Joseph Woll to stay injury-free? One of the big four, which it's looking more and more like it's going to be Marner, is going to be on the move.
Yeah.
There's a lot of changes that have to be had there, but I think if you're going to bring in a fresh mind behind the bench, I think Berube is exactly the kind of guy, regardless of what team it is, that's the kind of guy you want to come in, a guy that knows how to play in the playoffs, a guy who's won in the playoffs. And the reality of the situation is there's still work to be done there, but that's a hell of a hire for them. So we'll see where it takes them.
Yeah, I'm very interested. I think that's a great pickup on their end. I think Berube is a great
Oh,
fit there. Yeah.
that's really weird. As soon as we started talking about this, Elliot Freeman just tweeted the Leafs are officially going to announce or hold their press conference to officially announce Berube as head coach in 3
Today.
minutes.
Yeah. I think that's a great pickup. Obviously, I'm salty about the Blues beating the Bruins in 2019, but I love what Berube did in St. Louis in 2019. So I think that's a great fit for Toronto. Like you said, it's a fresh set of eyes behind the bench. I'm going to agree and say that, or I'm going to counter what you're saying. I think Keefe was a large part of the problem in Toronto. I'm not blaming him solely, but I think he was a big part of the problem. So to get Berube is a way better coach. I'm sorry, he is. So
well, he is, but they kept running it back with the same fucking team. That's the
right.
reality. Is that's why I don't think Keefe's entirely to blame. He played, he was dealt, and it wasn't a great hand. That's the bottom line.
Well, the other thing in Toronto is Shanahan's got to go too. I'm sorry, you got rid of Keefe. Let's get rid of Shanahan. Try something new. As far as Joseph Woll, I'm cool with them getting rid of Samsonov as long as Woll can stay healthy. But you got to have somebody halfway decent to back him up.
Okay, yay, more technical difficulties. So we're gonna put a bow on this thing pretty quick, but just to follow up on your point of the goaltending, there's gonna be enough guys out there this summer. They can go find a number 2. I'm not particularly worried about that, but they have bigger problems to address. It's just that they fixed one of them now with the coaching. So we'll see what they do. Before we go, real quick, last week the sports world lost an icon. Canadian Sports Center broadcaster Darren Dutchyshen passed away after a long battle with cancer. Far too young, not even 60 years old. So crushing loss for the sports community. I know a lot of people in Canada grew up watching him, and he was how a lot of people got introduced to hockey in Canada. So terribly sorry for him and his family and the crew at TSN and Bell Media. And it's just a shitty disease, and it's so awful to see anybody pass away. But from something like this it's truly just the worst. So, rest in peace, Darren. And I don't think you'll be forgotten.
Not at all. And again, our condolences go out to his friends and his family, and most importantly to his colleagues over at TSN.
I would say his friends and family are more important.
Well, yes, but
get your questions in.
Yeah. We didn't have any this week. That's okay. But get them in. You can email us. The email is contact@freshicehockeypodcast.com. If you're watching on YouTube and you'd prefer to leave them in the comments, you can certainly do that as well. Also, if you'd like a secondary email to send things to, you can send it to freshicehockeypodcast@gmail.com. So get those questions in. We'll read them on the show for you guys. Real quick, too, before we go, our next show will be Tuesday, May 28th. We have yet to decide if it's going to be live or not, but we will have our next guest, which is former NHL player Andrew Alberts. We will get more into that if you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, and Instagram is @Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. So make sure you're following us there so you can stay up to date on the show, and we'll be posting more about the Andrew Alberts episode on there. As always, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Zeno Pucks and Hockey Wraparound, with a special shout out and thank you to Bob Pizzini, Mark Mowers, and the Warrior for Life Fund. Just really incredible people. And thank you to everybody who supports and watches this show and everybody who helps make this show possible. Brian, you got anything else you got to add?
Just make sure if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, and please share the videos. YouTube has been the platform we've had the hardest time growing. So
yes,
please make sure if you're on YouTube, you're sharing it, liking it. The YouTube algorithm is a pain in the ass to battle. So do whatever you can to help us out would be greatly appreciated. Again, get those questions into, comment them in YouTube, email the show, do what you got to do. But as always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in, and hopefully at some point here, my fixed internet will actually work. It just was not this week. So now that we're going to get off here, I'm going to go scream at Spectrum probably for an hour. Don't worry, I'm not actually going to do that. I'm not that guy, but
just get scream in his living room for right now.
I'll probably just throw the modem and the router in the street and run them over with my Jeep.
Oh, there you go. Not a bad idea. With that being said, we will keep our eyes peeled for your questions. In the meantime, we will see you guys on Tuesday. Brian, take us home.
I'm surprised you're counting on me with this internet. Well, yeah, we'll see you guys next Tuesday again. And sorry for the no notice on not recording till Tuesday this week, but Andrew decided vacationing is more important than hockey. So yeah, whatever. Some team player, right?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. So yeah, yes, we will be back next Tuesday. You guys enjoy your week. Enjoy Memorial Day if you're in the U.S. and take care. And